So thank you very much to everyone for joining us for this last panel, I suppose, the two last parallel panels. This is panel 6 in our wonderful Transformations conference. I was hit by a car the other day. That's why I'm all patched up, in case anyone was wondering. But I am still very, very delighted that I was able to come along today to this amazing event. It was really such a joy the whole day today listening to everyone's presentations. I'm really, really delighted to be chairing this panel. My name is Rujana, I should probably say that. I'm a lecturer in visual culture and graphic design, for those who don't know me. So I teach contextual studies on the graphic design program. And actually one of my research specialisms, I suppose, is histories of exhibitions and thinking about the design history through exhibitions. So I'm really, really pleased to be chairing panel on exhibition cultures, which hopefully is going to bring up some of the themes as well that I think about historically, but in terms of contemporary practice. So we have 3 presenters, from all of them coming from different programs, which is really nice to see how different disciplinary specialisms, I suppose, think about exhibition spaces as well as artistic and creative practice, I suppose, in a wider sort of public field. How do we experience it? So we have Isabelle Farrant from animation, who is going to be talking about animation as installation. That is her topic, and hopefully thinking this is an opportunity for Isabelle also to think through her own practice. So she sent me a very nice email saying that some of the ideas are not fully defined, and I'm hoping that in discussion today you can develop those further, which is exactly what conferences and symposia are for. Then the second presenter is Elisabetta del Ponte, who is going to be thinking about art and playfulness, art and entertainment, and what is, I suppose, coming to some of the kind of core questions about what art is for and how do we experience it, what is it all about, what role it plays in our society. And then the last panelist is Millie Frank, who's going to be talking about adaptive reuse and the museum. So thinking about the physical space and the layers of history, in particular exhibition spaces, and how does that influence the way we perceive objects and artwork that is experienced in there. So thank you very much to all 3 panelists for submitting their paper for proposals and for coming along today. If anyone has any questions, we will come to those at the end, but feel free to post them in the chat as the presentations go along, so that we can return to them later. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say, so I'm going to hand it over to Isabelle. So whenever you're ready, feel free to share your screen and start your presentation.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So this is a new project of mine, Animation as Installation. So it's not complete research yet, since it's literally right at the very beginning, but I'm going to be talking about my dissertation as well and how it kind of links in. It's not working. So like I said, most of the research that I'm going to be showing is my dissertation research, and I'm going to link it in with this new project, and it's going to kind of guide my practice. And there's still a lot more research to do, but I kind of wanted to present it today because I'm thinking about perhaps having some collaborations during the project. So I wanted to not give up the opportunity just because it wasn't finished. So my dissertation research was into the language of Surrealism and its influence on stop motion animation. So I kind of gave a base of Surrealism in the dissertation and analysed 3 films, and in each of them I looked at film language in them in kind of 3 categories: in visual, conceptual, and verbal and written. I also took into consideration a method of identifying surrealism in animation, which is mentioned by Pikov, and which is basically just was the entire experience uncanny. necessarily breaking it apart as I did. I also looked at it as a whole, and I also focused on the notion of dream, since that's very important in surrealism. So I looked at The Starfish by Man Ray, Meshes of the Afternoon by Dyer, and Dimensions of Dialogue by Jan Svankmajer. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with all of them, since it will probably take quite a long time, but I wanted to analyse them in this order since they were in chronological order of being made. So The Starfish was an early surrealist film, Meshes of the Afternoon was a bit later, and I kind of used those two as a base of surrealist language generally, even though obviously I'd have to look at a lot more. But then I drew those the lines between those and Dimensions of Dialogue, so I could kind of answer the questions between the influence on on stop motion. Sorry. So one second. So I'm just going to conclude. I've got all my conclusions. I don't want to just read them off the screen, but so the surrealist language obviously kind of varied from artist to artist, and there aren't any technical rules, or like some of them had trick photography, some of them used different mediums, obviously, and things like that. And I found a lot of common factors in all the different languages, which I've listed here. So the visual language tended to confuse the viewer, dissociate them from reality, and provoke a dreamlike state. But each of the films had a lot of important conceptual language, like layers of surrealism. And something that I found was very important in surrealism was a critique on society or politics. A lot of the cases were in their own country, especially with Jan Svankmajer. And also, most surrealist films don't have any language at all, and that is, I found, was to segregate them further from reality. And yeah, but ultimately, ultimately it relies on projecting unconscious. I can't see my note there, sorry. Projecting the unconscious with the induction of dreamlike states and the association. And I found that, again, linking back to Pickhoff with the general feeling of the film, I found that a lot of it, you didn't really need to pick it apart, because the moods of the film was generally quite discomforting or uneasy and dissociating. So I found that you kind of don't need to pick it apart because you can quite obviously see when you judge it as an entity. And with stop motion or animation in general, it was kind of obvious, I think, that surrealism was going to make an influence, make an impact on it, because obviously the medium itself is very, you can do anything with it. You can completely make whatever you want on screen. But I found with stop motion in particular, it influenced them to embrace grotesque, obscure and bizarre themes and visual. But that was kind of a short summary of my conclusions of that research. But now I'm going to just talk a little bit about the merging into the next project. So there were a few different reasons that I became interested in installation. Obviously, because I've always been interested, and just that I've been curious of the integration between the two. And I haven't seen too many examples of installation in the form of animation, so it's kind of made me even more curious. But I'm going to be taking into account my dissertation research, because I found that one thing that is very key, obviously, in installation is the experience, because when you go in to see an installation, it is an experience with a lot more senses. And with surrealism, when I was talking about the overall tone, and it's very important, that surrealism is very important to have the experience. I hope that makes sense. So I kind of drew the lines between the two there, is that it links them together with the experience. But I'm also going to be including a few other theoretical ideas, because I wanted to kind of give it more intention and more research into that. So one of the areas that I'm going to be looking into is synesthesia and visual music. So in animation theory and history, these two go hand in hand. And at a very basic, very simple definition of synesthesia would be like a phenomenon that some people experience where they kind of perceive one sense as another. So as it says on the screen, can be seeing sound or hearing colour. One example of visual music is Begone Dog Hair by Norman McLaren, which is very important in animation history and in my practice. He basically worked along long strips of film along to the music that was engraved on the film. So it almost dances with the music, but I'm not so much interested in working with music, more visual sound, but one case would be with polyrhythms. So I've got a project in mind with polyrhythms. I'm not going to talk about this too much, but I'm also not going to play that link, but clapping music is one example. It kind of, yeah, sorry. One artist that is already playing with installation and animation is Dyer. So he kind of has revitalized zoetropes, makes these really amazing three-dimensional zoetropes, and he shows them in galleries and all sorts of places, and you can kind of go and interact with them. And it's really amazing, obviously, because there's no screen involved, and it's very interactive, and it's just really amazing. I haven't seen any in person, but his work is really cool. So unfortunately, I don't actually have a conclusion to this set of research since it's ongoing. So obviously my next steps will be to do more research and conduct some more writing, and then I'm going to work it into my practice. But as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons that I wanted to present it is because I'm looking for potential collaborators for this project, more so in the practice side of things, but if anyone was interested in doing some research as well, then I'd be open to that too. But that's everything from me. I have some contact details here, but feel free to contact me if you'd like to. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. A round of virtual applause. Thank you. That was a great presentation. I've taken lots of notes and have lots of questions, hopefully the audience as well. Thank you. Really nice to see some work in progress, as well as how has some completed work as well influenced the work in progress. So thank you very much for that. Great. I'm gonna switch now to our second presenter today. Elisabetta, are you okay to present? Great. Whenever you're ready, feel free to share your screen.
Right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
And can you see the slides?
Yes.
Let's see if they move. Yes, they move. Okay. Cool. They move too fast. Go away. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming and for listening to this paper. I just graduated in fine art. I used to hate art. I used to really hate it. I found it so serious. I found it so pompous. I found it so hermetic. I found it classist and exclusive. All these understanding things, all these meanings, all this fullness, all this intellectualization, it just made me hate it. I couldn't relate to it. I couldn't access it. And then I had an epiphany. I moved to London and I had an epiphany because I used to live in Italy, you see, the Belle Arti and everything. I moved to London and I got sucked by the underground movements. And I discovered another art that was very playful, mischievous nearly. That doesn't mean it couldn't be dark. It was very dark at some times, but it was accessible. I could speak to the artists and the artists would speak to me. And and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with this element of mischievous play and free. It felt free. So I thought, right, if this is art, I like this art. And I fell in love with it. And then I started thinking, okay, let me start understanding why. What is it about this art that I really like? And I think I need to explain the vocabulary I'm using. So when I talk about play and game, I talk about pure game, a primordial game, the game that for this guy who, by the way, if anyone wants to read about playfulness, please read him. Huizinga is called. There's Plato, ages ago, and then there's Huizinga. These two guys are amazing. Huizinga said, play is a free and meaningful activity, but the meaning is in per se, in the game itself, in playing the game. That's the meaning of the game. It's unproductive. It's spatially and temporally segregated from any requirements of practical life. And it's bound by a self-contained system of rules that holds absolutely. It's basically absolute disregards any other reason than playing for the play. And that means that plays are not a cultural phenomenon. That brings play back to a primordial state where even animals play. It's not rationalized. It's before humanity. It's before the Anthropocene. It belongs to nature. It's a primordial essence of being alive. I was like, wow, this guy really knows. And then I looked into Plato, no? Because let's go to the Greeks and the classics, make sure we cover it up. Yes, Plato is the same. He says no human affair is worth taking very seriously. Why? Because philosophy, for Plato is philosophy, but I'm metaphoring this and borrowing him to talk about knowledge and art, which is, it's not, philosophy is knowledge, art is knowledge in a sense. So bear with me. For Plato, philosophy, and for me, art, is either a joyful game or is less than nothing. For Kierkegaard, humor is the incognito that raises us to understanding life because it pushes us forwards and we don't succumb, let's say, to the moods of being human, of being rational. Fecundity, genuine seriousness, real understandings come from this kind of, Ardley would say, aerial flights of play, which makes it very light. And I think it really gives the idea of what it is about play. And then I looked at art and what I felt I really loved about art. And the art that I love is the art that disrupts, that resists, that goes against the status quo. So And to be that kind of art, it has to be not. A bit like punk is not, you know, when you define punk, punk is not. Well, art is not, like Jelinek says, because art can be serious, art can require dedication, application, but it is not. It is not political action. These are all second purposes. This is all cultural, contextual purposes that we put on top and to explain to ourselves and to rationalize. But before that rational mind, before that mind, there's something else in the art, in the artist and in the art, which is a vocation. Because art is not work for me. Art is not labor for money. Art is neither a commodity nor something made to market's request. Definitely, it is something not made to market's request. Art comes from self-reflection, expression, and reach out to others. And in fact, my art is my fart. That's just to play a bit. So for me, these are two other amazing statements, one from Toni Morris and one from Schiller. Again, the poor guy who was killed, by the way, by the philosophers because he wasn't very consistent, but he was really trying hard to explain. And I think the spirit of his writing is amazing. He's really pure in his trying to understand what is the purity of beauty, the purity of the aestheticism, the purity of art. And he says, art is the daughter of freedom and must receive her commissions from the needs of spirits, not from the exigency of matter. So the exigency of matter is also the humanity, the anthropomorphization of things for me. So what I'm trying to say here is that all the postulates around, all the central postulates around play and game for me, which are the fact, we'll see what they are, legitimize and make a run for a theory of art that needs an element of play to be true to itself. So art implies freedom to express, and on this we can all agree. Freedom to express implies play. So if I want to do a very basic sophism, which might be wrong, might be attackable, but is still a sophism as such, I can say that if true play knows no propaganda, then true art knows no propaganda. If play's aim is in itself, then art's aim is in itself. And its familiar spirit is the happy inspiration. By happy, I don't mean necessarily fun. It's the joyful, it is the relief of the spirit inspiration. And I think the reason for that is that why am I trying to go back to before culture, before rationalization, before mind, our mind, is because to be a sound culture creating force, art needs to be pure. And to be pure, it has to have a play element because it must not consist in, as Huizinga said, the darkening or debasing of standards set up by reason, faith, or humanity. In that sense, it's incredibly pure because it raises above. And so there's a freedom family here. I was trying to put the dots together. I was like, oh, right, here's the freedom family. That's what it's all about. Play and game, the primordial game. We talked about what my definition of game is, the pure primordial game. And art, we talked about my definition of art, the primordial primitive. They all have the same things, the same postulates. There's a free choice and expression. I choose to make my piece and I express it the way I want it as an artist. I do it for the sake of doing it. I need to do it, I'm gonna do it, I'm doing it. And the same is for game. It's not for profit. It's certainly not for profit. And it's a bubble of surrealism, sorry, not surrealism, of make-believe, but here's a big connection to the alchemists of the surreals and to your presentation. It's temporary, it's a bubble, it's like a bubble. You go in and you come out, and it's got its own made up rules. So then I went back to my thinking, why did I hate art if art is so beautiful? Oh, wait a minute. There's a dichotomy. There's a massive dichotomy between art and the art world. We're talking about misappropriation here. Misappropriation of language, culture, context, and concepts. Because the art world is all meaningful, is all lucrative, is all caged, is all cultural, contextual. So it's like the art world has got art in it, but art doesn't have the art world in it. Doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Why there's that art world, there's called art world, and there's art, and I think those two are separate. How can it make sense? But the art world says it's about art. Okay, I get it now. It really is true. There is a misappropriation of terms. We need to do a glossary of terms. As simple as that. Because some people have misappropriated of the terms of art, we need to redo a glossary of terms. And we need to put the two side by side. So there's the art piece, which is free choice, in the moment, a bubble, made per se, all non-lucratives, all the things we said before. And there's the artwork, which is commissioned, is asked for, is lucrative, is produced for a reason. There's the artist who is vocational, who just goes, oh, I want to do this, I want to express this, oh my God, I just realized this, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the skilled craft worker. Matisse, he was doing his drawings, but then he was commissioned to do the steps with all the dancers. There, in that moment, he's not Matisse the artist. He's a skilled craft worker who is using his amazing artistic skills to answer a brief. There's the art critic, there's the artistic PR man and marketing editor. There's the museum, the real museum, and there's the estate. You know, oh, right, let's get the Battersea, it's an amazing, iconic place. Let's get it, and then we'll do a proper art washing, and then we'll gentrify everything, and everything is going to be fine, and we're going to be rich, and we'll get the artists out of the way. There's the art organizations, there's the building investment and tax account relief. There's artistic culture and education, and there's artistic exploitation, misappropriation, and commodification. There's art, and there's the art world, which we actually should call the art industry. They're tricking us. It's the wrong word. It's the wrong word. Now, Luke, if you're here, you might get upset about this. Everyone's got their opinion, but here's my clear example. For me, is absolutely clear of a very skilled crafts workman on the left, Damien Hirst, very skilled, and an artist that is true to herself. And in this sense, I'm not saying that Damien Hirst is bad. All I'm saying is a money machine, and is a very good money machine, like Madonna is. She's an artist as well, but she's also a money machine. When she makes money, she's using her artistry for other purposes that are not just per se. Why would you cover a skull with diamonds and then have to set up your own institution to buy it again because nobody's buying it? Because it's a money machine. If you don't know about this, look into it. It's an amazing story. Other examples. My goblin, because I have many goblins and many mischievous animals in me. So my goblin was being very playful before when I was comparing Damien Hirst with Tracy Emin. But then the mischief started getting scared, and I got, oh, my serious self came out and got all worried and fearful and said, wait a minute, people will get upset about this and they might not find you as mischievous and playful as you feel. They might think you're putting yourself on a pedestal. So I stopped. I stopped comparing the goodies and the baddies, and I just put the goodies there, right? So Louise Bourgeois had to wait till 60, but she kept on doing her things before she got picked up. Monet, the poor guy, just died poor. Van Gogh, we know. Franco B, he if you read his story, I mean, he was adopted by the Red Cross. That's why he has so many elements of Red Cross in his art. He's being true to himself. So what is my cartina di tornasole? Is the thing that tells you what pH you've got in your wee or whatever, right? Well, that tells you the truth, basically. So my cartina di tornasole is that the undiluted, genuine, free art pieces show joyful play between form and matter, between beauty and necessity, and they present the highest kind of play / art. Because without playfulness, whatever I learned to do, I feel it's impure and it's limited because it's too much linked to only my brain, my capacities as a human. While if I go beyond that or before that, before culture, before me as a human, and I go into this kind of state of trance, of playfulness, I have this feeling that, oh my God, I'm being pure. I'm detaching myself from all this. And I'm just portraying what I'm feeling. Like Schaffer said for the noise music, is comme quelque chose de totalement inutile, totally useless. The act of is totally useless. Then whatever comes out of it can be useful. And in my experience, therefore, as an artist, to paraphrase Plato again, I think I'm falling in love with this guy. Thank God he's not alive. If life must be lived as play, which is what he says, even more so art shall be lived as play. And then a man will be able to propitiate the truth and defend himself against his internal enemies and win the contest. Thus men will live accordingly to nature, since in most respects they are puppets, yet having a small part in truth. Because of its primitive and basic intuitive nature, playfulness as a philosophy of art transcends for me, and therefore raises my art above all those problematic contextual, cultural, socioeconomic contexts that otherwise would drive me rationally to do something that, for example, might be sellable, that, for example, might answer someone else's needs, and therefore might be featured. By the way, playfulness is also a massive, incredible weapon against fear. And the fear to express yourself in art is very, very present because of the art market. So I think, to conclude, I call for a j'accuse on the art world with a small a, to stop faking it and actually being art, being free, being playful, being joyous. If we abandon ourselves to reason and reason only, we lose touch with the gods of nature. And once we lose that purity and of intention, we are just commodity producers in a conveyor belt that we don't even see. We become assets of a game. We should stop being shallow in our seriousness and be much more serious about our playfulness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisabetta. Again, a round of applause. That was such a brilliantly provocative and playful presentation. I'm sure there are lots of questions. There are already some comments in the chat about notions of sort of gatekeeping and guardians and the whole kind of ecosystem of art that which I hope we can return to in the discussion. So thank you very much. I would like to invite our last speaker for today, Nili, please, if you would like to share your slides and present your research on adaptive reuse and a museum.
What was the shortcut again? Sorry.
Say that again, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What was the shortcut again? Sorry.
Yes, it's Command L, I think, if you're on a Mac.
Okay, do you see it in full screen now?
Not yet. Perfect. Yeah, now it's in full screen. Great.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm going to talk about my dissertation about adaptive reuse and the museum and the potency of the existing shell. So the research project explored the effects of displaying exhibition objects within buildings that are designed using adaptive reuse and its potency, which means its power to transform people's experiences and perceptions. It examined how the reuse of a building as an exhibition added a new set of connections by multiplying the interactions and enhancing the complexity. It explored the connections with within three exhibition spaces: the News Museum, Lafayette Anticipations, and the White Cube Gallery in Bermondsey. And all of those respond to adaptive reuse and the allegations of the White Cube differently. Additionally, I have tried to identify spatial, experiential, and atmospherical elements that the design provide to the visitors so that they are able to physically or emotionally connect to the exhibited objects. The initial process began by looking into the museum and how it affects its visitors. The museum is defined as a building in which objects of interest are stored and exhibited. Any object ranging from objects with sentimental historical connotations to newer experiential collections. The museum as a building, on the other hand, becomes both a place for displayed objects and a displayed object in itself. It implies that the perception of the building as a shell, the box which contains it, and asks several questions on its relationship with objects exhibited inside it. This point of view can be applied to any museum building, while in the case of adaptive reuse buildings, the view becomes more prominent. By placing a museum in a pre-existing shell, does it become a display case or does it become a skeleton? I began to investigate how the reuse of a building is an exhibition transform people's experiences and perceptions. However, the experiential of the pre-existing shell has a context to an exhibition and cannot be studied in only theory form. So the use of case studies and the people who have visited them is required to clarify these impacts and making them intelligible. So these are the three case studies. I'm going to talk briefly through them. So the first one I have kind of called The Spirit Within the Ruins. The News Museum is restored and designed by David Chipperfield and is an example of a building that is displaying the museum objects in context with historical significance. The building had previously been a museum housing Prussia's royal collections. However, after the Second World War, it became an abandoned bomb site. The building assimilates the new to the pre-existing whole, maintaining the historical features to convey a message that is intended for the visitor. When Chipperfield was presented with the restoration, his approach was to emphasize the spirit within the ruin, creating a paradoxical operation by preserving the character of decay in fixed environments which museums require. By preserving the scars of war through meticulous salvage of bullets and bits of destroyed plaster and brick, woven with insertions of new prefabricated concrete, like for example the staircase, which some of you might know, which follows the form of the building. No, it follows the form of this previous staircase, which it reinstates. The building becomes an exhibition object in itself by projecting a context and evoking associations of a difficult past. By preserving the function of the new museum as a museum and using the context of what the structure has been subjected to, the dark heritage becomes a ghost, believed to become manifest to the living. And then the next one, it's the host, which is Lafayette Anticipations, which is an example of an interior created by a juxtaposition of the old and the new, where the honest material expression only distinguishes the new structural elements and the secondary features to make the building functional in terms of its new purpose, beyond the relation between the old and the new. Initially, the architects at OMA had planned to demolish half of the building, but during the planning stages, the project became landmarked and everything had to be preserved. The installation where the new addition is inhabiting the space confines the old and create a spatial relationship without affecting the integrity of the original building. The differentiation in material, movement, and atmosphere interact with the visitor's bodily senses, making it an experiential space. By exhibiting the collection of art within an environment that allows the visitor to understand its context, it allows for the visitor to form new connections between themselves, the space, and the collection, thus enhancing the complexity of the museum experience. In difference to the new museum, has the previous function of the building become secondary to its new function. It merely has the host, it is merely the host, thus providing a context to the experience of the building, but not to the complexity of the exhibited objects. The host demonstrates that it's become more enduring than its function. It becomes self-sufficient almost as an object and can be appreciated as an object. By not rejecting the past, but by contrasting it, it becomes relative to the new function and emphasize the insertion by carrying images and qualities of the past. Furthermore, allowing the space and the objects in it to and the objects it contains to be perceived in two ways: in relation to their contemporary, you get what I mean, reality, and as an object connecting to the previous function. And the last case study is the White Cube Gallery in Bermondsey, which is converted by Casper Neer and is an example of individualization as a new distinct entity, making the new structure adjacent to the old. Casper Neer converted the existing 1970 South London warehouse to a contemporary art gallery. The new museum space was inserted as a freestanding volume, a shell within a shell. The environment of the White Cube has to do with design elements in relation to exhibits on display. It is conceived as a space without context, where time and social space are thought to be excluded from the experience of artworks. The museum separates itself from the museum's past by covering the remnants of what was before, by allowing the exhibited objects to convey its meaning to the visitors in a different way than the collections within News Museum and Lafayette anticipations. The intention is that of what Brian or Dorothy described, by allowing the visitor to perceive the art in his or her own way without being led to a conclusion. However, in many ways, the white wall is perceived as a spatial quality in itself, and the suggestion of elimination of any context becomes context. Especially the white cube of the 20th century gallery is more of a context to the way the visitor observes the art. The pre-existing structure is often considered as an inappropriate space for an art exhibition, because by providing the visitor with images of the past, it can and will affect the perception of the displayed works of art. However, is the achievement of the natural environment, the space without context, an impossibility within the 20th century? In many ways, the context of the past, which the building provides the visitor with an experience factor, multiplies the interactions and enhance the complexity of the collection. The adaptive use of a building as museum, despite its previous function, seemed to be inappropriate since the building had lost its links with its previous life, frozen objects within a frozen shell. The object is displayed in some way to form the basis of a setting, although becoming an experiential space where the connections are multiplied and the new relationships between the art and the observer become significant. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Again, a round of applause, virtual applause. Thank you so much, Millie, and thank you to all three presenters in this panel. I would like to open it up to the audience, I suppose, and ask if there are any questions for our three speakers. Would anyone like to start?
I could ask a question. I was thinking that when we were looking at it, we've all been in a virtual world for so long. And I wondered what, looking at Millie's talk, the white cube, it's a sort of sterile space. And I was wondering, you know, it could be a virtual place in itself. It could be a virtual place. And thinking about the first talk, Isabella's talk, I was debating about this idea of the surrealism to transport you to the unreal. And so I was wondering if if you put Tracy Emin in the white cube, which she was in the white cube, is that a right fit? Is that the right fit for her? You know, kind of, is there some story that should be told to transform us to somewhere else? So is there an appropriateness of the space to the artist, I guess, is the question.
I don't know, maybe, I think it was Eli? Yeah, how do you say your name?
Me?
Yeah, you had the works in your presentation. Maybe, I mean, she did have her works within the white cube, and I actually did go and view that exhibition, and it felt very powerful within the space, but yeah, it's a really difficult question.
I think it would be nice to ask Tracy what she thinks, whether she would be happy or not.
It seemed to me that it was the wrong fit. I mean, just kind of as a, it's great work, it's just the wrong fit. And I do, I mean, we've possibly all been to exhibitions now where you can go in on computer and then click to go there, and then click to go there, and click to go there. And I kind of, that suits certain contexts. It suits, what are we getting out of being in the physical space? That is what you said about the disassociation with reality. that kind of you're trying to get with your animation. So I wondered that it seems to me that the setting is all important for that. So I was really interested in the zoetropes, the kind of contemporary zoetropes. I kind of thought that was a really interesting way of thinking of animation that obviously is a past example, but it's really interesting.
I think it definitely matters the space that it's presented in, because with installation, the space is part of the work. So I think it is, I don't know what else to say, but it's definitely important, because if you've got a piece of art in the wrong place or in a place it's not intended to be, then it's not going to have the same impact, is it? So
absolutely. Thanks. Thank you very much for the great question. Anyone else has any questions for panelists? Luke, yes, please.
I've got a question for Elisabetta. So I don't know if this is a cheeky question or not, and I think you'll probably have some very interesting things to say about it. So when you were talking about play, I suppose the thing that sort of seemed to be the thing that was kind of dancing around my mind was like the question about like the other people. So is which I don't think you kind of really sort of talked about. So is play something you do on your own, or does it require other people? And what would the implications of that be for art if we kind of bring up the relationship to other people? The question.
Thank you so much for this question, Luke. Thank you so much. Because actually part of my dissertation was about that. And yes, of course, play. And that's why I talked about game, because game is is what game implies more people generally, unless you say it's a solitaire. And when you look at the rules that Huizinga put down for the primordial play, they all fit with either you play on your own or with many people. The freedom of choice is also the freedom to participate. The fact that it's got made up rules is this bubble that one creates that is outside of reality, within reality, that anyone can access, accepting. It's a bit like animation. Except when you look at an animation, you accept the rules of the animator. That's where the engagement comes from. You're accepting to play those games, to accept those rules. And it's the same with game. It's a free choice. This is the game we're playing. These are the rules, as logical or as arbitrary as they might be. It doesn't matter. If you want to play, come and play. And that, I think, for me, when I was talking about my art and my installations and my performances, that's exactly what it is. Yo, guys, I've just had an epiphany. I'm going to tell you about my epiphany. This is how I'm going to tell you. This is my medium. This is how I can tell you this thing. And this is how I would like to converse with you. Please, here are the tools. If you want, come and converse with me. And that's why I think I get so confused and disappointed with the art world, because then they tell you, it's a game you have to play. It's not a game, because a game would be something that anyone can play. But no, there's gatekeepers, so not everyone can play it. It's a game is something where you make up rules, and anyone can make up rules. I make up rules, and then you make another game and you make up your own rules. It's not like the art world is the beholder of the rules. So I hope that answers partially your question.
Thank you very much. I think Anne has another question as well for Elisabetta, if you want to.
Hi, yes, thank you. I really enjoyed all three presentations, and it could be a question for anyone, but really thinking about that idea of play. What kept going through my head, I think, was the idea about subject position of play and how it's not perhaps culturally neutral. And obviously with the idea of thinking, I guess, a mainstream idea of play would be something that you do in leisure time, but leisure time isn't culturally neutral either, because some people have got an awful lot more leisure time than others, and that's obviously to do with capitalism and stuff. So how do you, if you're thinking about art as play and trying to position that really in opposition in some ways to some aspects of the art world, how do you deal with that idea of a kind of cultural subjectivity? Because really what you seem to be talking about is a kind of quite a Western capitalist idea of art, really, rather than any, something more.
Yes.
Pure. That makes sense. I think.
Yes, absolutely. Sense. And it makes even more sense because I'm a Western white person. I wanted to tell you, what was it? Can you tell me the first line of your question, because that gave me a hook.
And about subject, I asked you about subject position, but also how would you, if you want your art, play?
Yes. So yeah. The great thing about Huizinga, there's only 3 people that I've read about that have put play, have defined play in the way that I think it is. And it's this primordial play, is pre-cultural. And that's what I love about it, is because if it's pre-cultural, we are talking about the playing that you see in animals as well. It's us, it's our culture. It's like, I think culture is not necessarily always good, because it's putting layers and layers of rationalization on top of things. And I think that's what is happening with, in a sense, with art, that we have to put layers and layers and layers on top. And of course it depends on culture. So the Western culture is, at one level is going this direction, the other culture is going this direction. They all gonna, some more than others might have too many layers, and that takes all the playfulness out of art, and that is where the disappointment comes, and the kind of, oh my God, but this is not right. This doesn't feel pure enough. This doesn't feel natural enough. This feels constrained.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you very much. Does anyone, any other questions for our panelists? Then I might take the opportunity to ask Isabelle a question. Isabelle, can you tell us a bit more? I think you kind of hinted at that in your presentation, but I just wanted to know more about your practice as an animator, as an artist. I don't know, how do you define yourself, and actually where do you see, also wanted in practical terms, you've written the dissertation, but is that this project, did you complete your studies, or are you still in the sort of final major project stage? It would be great to know what kind of, vision you have for yourself as a practitioner as well.
Yeah, so I've finished my studies, but I'm just basically just extending it in my own time, and I'm going to probably do a postgraduate as well. So I've done mainly, I haven't done anything to do with installation yet. I did a small project that was kind of leaning in the direction, but it's kind of where I'm going. So as for what I've done some stop motion, and I've done some kind of more experimental things. Yeah, I'm not sure what else.
No, that's great. And what kind of does, again, you were speaking about surrealism and how, about both it as an experience, as an aesthetic experience, but also in terms of its content. So I was also wondering what kind of themes, if there are any specific kind of themes or strands within your practice that your work deals with.
So I was looking into surrealism. That's why I did my dissertation. I had my grad film, which I didn't get to complete because it was stop motion and I couldn't get access for most of the year, but it's all planned out. It's all been planned out. But that one followed a lot of ideas of surrealism and language kind of generally. I don't really have something I cling on to. I kind of have been trying out different areas, but I think some things that have stuck with me a bit more are some things I was talking about, like visual music was an interesting one, and surrealism I think I'll carry on with. Not that I'm saying that I'm going to be surrealist, but just ideas I'll take from. But yeah, I think I'm still finding my footing, but yeah.
Great, thank you very much. There are some great comments as well in the chat in terms of suggestions for books and resources and other spaces to continue kind of exploring and researching the topics here. Ellie, yes, please feel free.
Yes, I was just going to say to Isabelle, so I'm a big fan of the alchemists of the surreal, and I'm a digital puppeteer, which is runs parallel to animation. Is the difference between real-time animation and not real-time animation. So I would be really interested in collaborating at some point. If we do, I'll send you my email later. That's all.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic, great. It's really good, building connections. And Millie, did you get to visit these 3 exhibition spaces that you were talking about, or did COVID or other issues preclude you from actually being able to experience them? Because again, this word experience came up a lot of times in our presentations, and actually I think it's kind of important as well from the point of view of the researcher.
Yeah, so I have gone to the White Cube myself, and I kind of tried to find my own interpretation of the space and how I felt and how I interacted with the space. And then for the News Museum, because of COVID, it's not possible, wasn't possible, but I talked to not Michael, but my other teacher, which also he has been there. So I visited, now I interviewed him. And then my brother studies in Paris, so I could ask him about the Lafayette anticipations, which was really good. So it was really nice to kind of involve someone else in the dissertation, because a lot, like we have talked about a little bit, but as Michael said, when you do a walkthrough of a museum, it's a very different experience to what I think of the space. It's a very different experience from what the interview subjects said that they experienced there. So it's really interesting to see what kind, the space and the atmosphere and the whole feeling, the touch and everything, how it affects you as you're within a museum or an exhibition.
That's really great. They explore different methods of doing this research despite the limitations. And absolutely, yes, the physical experience varies. And actually, you know, different exhibitions, probably if you visit this space at different kind of, with different exhibitions in or different kinds of installations, that we will have a completely different experience. Luke, did you have your hand up, or was that?
Yeah, I was kind of just sort of following on from that. I'm not sure if it's a question or if it's quite made its way into my head as a question yet. But I mean, when you were giving your paper, because I mentioned a writer called Walter Benjamin to Isabelle, and he has this kind of concept which is very sort of famous in cultural studies of aura, you know, the unique presence of an object.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that sort of seems very sort of German, and that kind of, that presence of the object is, the aura that it has is also kind of, its history is part of that, all the sort of the accumulated years and things that it's gone through between its kind of creation and us in the present. And in a way, I think it's very interesting, your presentation, in terms of kind of the way that, or the relationship between the aura of an object within a museum and the aura of the space sort of seems to be a very sort of interesting thing. And in some ways, a white cube might sort of seem to be a space that is designed to create that sort of magical presence of the object, but it does so in a very different kind of a way to sort of having it in a place like the Neues Museum, you know, which has its own kind of history and its own past, which the object then kind of interacts with. So as I say, I'm not absolutely sure what the question is, but you know, what would you, I guess, what is sort of the difference between the kind of aura created in those different spaces, and what are the implications of those differences, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, like one suggestion to what I said earlier, just to finish up, is to go to a museum with 2 different people. So you go once with one person, and then you go another time with someone else. And just the way they interact with different pieces, they make your other people around you, they make the experience. And so from what the interviews that I did with, for example, my other teacher, he said that he was very emotionally connected to this the News Museum, and he felt like within the News Museum there is some elements of newness. So some parts of the museum have been more kind of redone, and it doesn't have that historical Second World War feeling to it. And what he said, that when he walked into that, it felt almost as a relief, like he had a moment to breathe before he carried through further. And I think it's all these things that the different spaces, they are kind of designed to make you feel they're designed to make you feel a way about the object, but also just about like all of your memories, what you think about, what you like what is important to you within history. So they try to connect in different ways, and it's individual how you react to the space and the object, but as a kind of general thing, it's maybe that the people that are around you can really change the experience as well. Yeah.
I did wonder how much museums are reliant on the cafe. You know, kind of like the cafe is a space to sit down. If they're all concrete floor and white walls, you know, kind of like that's the sort of, you know, the usual. And then kind of where you hang out afterwards is the sort of tends to be, you know, kind of a more memorable experience. You know, kind of you're sitting chatting with somebody you've just been through the art space with. So when you're in the space itself, you're sort of absorbed with the art, and then when you come out of it, you kind of can start to rationalize it, and that's usually in the cafe. There's a next third year project on the cafe.
That taps into some of the issues that Elisabetta has with, I suppose, the whole system, right? As the cafe is a necessary money-making machine for the kind of starved institutions in our kind of.
Don't get me started.
But obviously it is really important beyond that, as a kind of, how do museums become social spaces, right? You're not just going there to see the exhibition and to experience what is on display, but also to use it as a kind of an extension of public space, etc., etc. So that's
where do you buy the tea towel with the artist's work on it? You know, kind of that's the most important thing.
The shop. Any other comments or questions or thoughts? Yeah, exactly, Luke. Yeah, maybe that is the place where people start to play. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to our panelists who've done lots of research and really presented their work in an engaging, playful, and really, really professional way. I was in awe of all of the presentations that I sat through today, especially this last panel. There are lots of notes and comments in the chat, so for the presenters as well. If you haven't looked at those comments, do take a look at them, because I think they're really useful, interesting references there for you to take your research further. And I think we are going to close this room now, Luke, if I'm not mistaken, and reconvene on the main link in about 10 minutes. I think it was 3:25. But before we do that, I would like to invite everyone to unmute themselves and to give a proper round of applause to our fantastic speakers. Thank you very much for participating today. It was an absolute joy. Thank you.